Have you ever felt that disconnect? You hear on the news about Taiwan's amazing economic growth, our world-leading tech, but then you look at your own bank account, your rent, the price of groceries, and it just doesn't add up. It's like we're living in two totally different worlds at the same time. Well, today, we're going to decode that feeling. We're going to figure out why. I mean, just look at this contrast, right? On one side, you've got this incredible success story. Taiwan is a global semiconductor powerhouse. We're literally at the center of the world's most important industry. But then, on the other side, there's this daily crushing reality for so many of us. The sky-high cost of living and a housing market that feels completely out of reach. How can both of these things be true at once? And that really gets to the heart of the matter. It's the big question we're tackling in this explainer. If the country as a whole is doing so well, why don't more of us feel it? Why isn't that success translating into real prosperity for everyday people? Now, this isn't just some temporary blip. It's a deep structural issue. And to really get it, we need a whole new way of looking at our economy. And that new way of looking comes from a maybe surprising place. A French historian named Fernand Braudel. Now, don't tune out. This isn't going to be a dry history lesson. Think of Braudel as giving us a special pair of X-ray glasses, a tool that lets us see the hidden skeleton of our economy that's usually invisible. So Braudet's big idea was that any economy, at any time in history, is actually made up of 3 different layers, all working at the same time. He was obsessed with what he called the longue durée, the long term. He wasn't interested in daily stock market news. No, he was like a geologist, looking at the slow-moving tectonic plates that shape everything over centuries. He wanted to see the deep structures that really define our lives. All right, so let's put on those Braudelian X-ray goggles. We're going to take his 3-layer model and apply it directly to Taiwan right now. Let's see if it can help us make sense of this two-world reality we're all living in. Let's start at the very bottom with layer 1, with material life. Braudel called it material life. This is the foundation of everything. It's the world of our daily routines, the absolute necessities, food, clothes, and, of course, a place to live. Braudel saw this layer as having a lot of inertia. It's sluggish, it's slow to change, and it's often shaped by forces we don't even think about. It's just the bedrock of our existence. So what does that inertia look like in Taiwan today? Well, you can sum it up in one word: housing. Our housing market has become this giant, almost immovable weight on society. It's not just about shelter anymore, is it? It's become the main way people store and grow wealth, and that has turned a basic human need into a financial game, creating what you could call a financialized inertia that traps people and just drains their income, no matter how hard they work. Okay, moving up to the middle layer, we get to layer 2, the market economy. This is the world we're all familiar with. It's the one we see and interact with every day. All the shops, the restaurants, the small businesses all competing with one another. This is where you're supposed to have open competition, transparent pricing, and where businesses work hard to earn a normal profit. And in Taiwan, the absolute engine of this middle layer is our famous small and medium-sized enterprises, our SMEs. They're the ones who are super flexible, innovative, and constantly adapting. But here's the problem. They're caught in a vice. They're being squeezed from below by the crushing costs of layer I, especially rent, and they're being squeezed from above by huge platforms that control the market and dictate the terms. And that brings us to the very top, layer 3, capitalism. Now, this is where Braudel's idea gets really mind-blowing. For him, capitalism was not the same thing as the market economy in layer 2. Not at all. This top layer is a different world entirely. It's the domain of a few ultra-powerful players. It's all about monopoly, speculation, and operating on a global scale to rake in massive, outsized profits. In fact, Braudel had this brilliant, cutting name for it. He called it the anti-market. Think about that. It's the anti-market, because the entire goal of the players in this top layer is to avoid the fair and open competition of layer 2. They use their power, their money, and their connections to bend the rules, to create monopolies, and to make sure nobody else can compete with them. And if you're looking for layer 3 in Taiwan, you don't have to look very far. It is dominated by our global high-tech giants, especially in the semiconductor industry. Their incredible success comes from this anti-market space. It's built on things like technological dominance, massive barriers to entry, and strategic support from the state. This right here, this is the source of all those glowing economic headlines. So, let's just lay it all out. When you use this framework, you get a crystal clear map of Taiwan's economy. At the bottom, layer I, we've got the structural burden of insane housing costs weighing on our daily lives. In the middle, layer 2, we have our amazing SMEs fighting tooth and nail in an intensely competitive market. And at the very top, layer 3, you have the global power of the high-tech giants, playing in their own anti-market league. Suddenly, the feeling of living in two different worlds starts to make a whole lot of sense, doesn't it? But this model does more than just describe three separate floors. It shows us the root of the problem. There's what the source material calls a vertical destructure. Basically, a deep crack that runs right through the structure of our economy, separating the layers from each other. And to put it as bluntly as possible, wealth is not trickling down. The enormous profits being generated at the top, in layer 3, are just not making their way down to the businesses in layer 2 or the people living in layer 1. The whole system is disconnected. You know, it's fascinating because Brodel saw this same dynamic playing out centuries ago. Looking at these deep divides, he wrote that it creates, quote, at least two worlds, two foreign lives, people living side by side but in completely separate realities. That perfectly captures that feeling we talked about at the start. But it's actually even worse than just a lack of connection. The model shows there's an upward suction effect. It's not just that money isn't flowing down, value is actively being pulled up. The huge capital from layer 3, it flows right past layer 2 and gets parked in layer I real estate as an investment, which just drives housing costs even higher for everyone else. And at the same time, those big layer 3 platforms are extracting profits from the layer 2 businesses. It's a system that systematically funnels wealth from the bottom to the top. So what's the point of all this? Well, understanding this structure isn't just an academic game. It actually points us toward a totally different kind of solution, one that goes beyond surface-level fixes and addresses the real root of the problem. So if you take this analysis seriously, what would a real solution look like? Well, first, you've got to tackle layer I by reforming property and capital gains taxes to take the pressure off housing. Second, you have to protect layer 2, our SMEs, by regulating the monopoly power of the big platforms to ensure the market is actually fair. And third, you have to realign layer 3, making sure that the massive profits from our strategic industries are shared more broadly to benefit all of society. And that's really the key takeaway here. Handing out a few small subsidies is like putting a Band-Aid on a deep wound. The problem isn't temporary. It's baked into the very architecture of our economy. The only real path forward is through deep, meaningful structural reform that rebalances the relationships between these three layers. So that leaves us with the final and most important question. Now that we have this map, this way of seeing the structure that divides us into two different worlds, the real work begins. How do we find the courage and the collective will to actually build a bridge between them? What do you think is the first step we need to take? Thanks for joining me for this one.